Hi everyone, nice to see you all here again, or indeed if you're listening to the podcast, nice to have you with us. And this month in April we are going to be talking to our picture book creator today, and we're going to be talking about the most gorgeous book, guys. I am just so chuffed to be telling you about it because I love it. So today we're going to be talking about The Library Mouse. And I'm going to be talking to Frances Tosdevin about her beautiful book. Thank you, Frances, for coming along to talk to us.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
It's a real pleasure. I've got to say, I absolutely loved reading this, and I read it to my granddaughter, and she loves it as well. In fact, it was a little bit hard for me to keep it here at my house and not let her take it home because she was rather keen on taking it home. So,
oh, that's lovely.
I may not have it here for long. Let's put it that way. Would it be okay with you if we start with a reading from you?
Of course, yes, absolutely. So it's The Library Mouse. It's by me, Frances Tosdevin, illustrated by Sophia O'Connor. The Library Mouse. In a half-hidden hole where the wall met the floor sat a dreamer called Quill with a pen in his paw. He lived in a beautiful building of books that shimmied up shelving and nestled in nooks. Each morning he crept from his home to behold the faces of children as stories were told. If only a small timid creature like me could share my own stories, how proud I would be. I may be a mouse, but I've so much to say. Could someone like me be an author one day? With candle stubs burning, Quill sat down to write, his pen full of power, his words bold and bright. Quill scribbled and scrawled till his story was done. But how can I share it with everyone? His frisky friend Legsy then jitterbugged out. Perhaps you can read it yourself if you shout. Next morning, the storytime bell woke the mouse, who slumped out of bed with a grump and a grouse. He saw that the cleaner was holding a book and stuck out his snout for a beadier look. Well, as luck would have it, my hearing device was tuned to the sound waves of small, shouty mice. A high squeaky yell made me check out the bin. Thank goodness it did, 'cause I'd thrown this book in. It's yours, shouted Legsy, and jitterbugged madly. You've got their attention. She spun around gladly. Quill gulped and emerged in a daze to behold the faces light up as his story was told. And everyone listened, and everyone heard his wonderful story, each fabulous word. What's more, with the help of the hearing device, Quill offered the children some writing advice. In a half-hidden hole where the wall met the floor sat a writer called Quill with a pen in his paw. For he was the author of beautiful books that shimmied up shelving and nestled in nooks.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I was smiling all the way through that, and I love the names. I love the name Legsy for a spider.
Oh,
I just think it's fabulous.
Thank you.
Such good fun, and the idea of books shimmying up bookcases is such a wonderfully evocative one. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Oh,
so,
thank you.
what was what gave you the initial idea for this book? What inspired you to create this fabulous library-based book?
Well, I was actually visiting a library in London with my younger daughter. She had a new baby and I had a new book baby. It was a couple of years ago, and The Bear and Her Book, There's More to See, had just come out. And I popped into my daughter's local library, which is in Haringey. I think it's Hornsey Library. And all around the edge of the room, they got like box seating. And I just, for no reason at all, just suddenly thought, oh, what if a mouse was living under that seat? What would that mouse's story be? And that idea just stuck in my mind. And I think it was a couple of months later, I just wrote the story because I'd done a lot of thinking by then. So I knew what I wanted the mouse's story to be. But no, it all came from a visit to this library in London.
Well, there is no better inspiration, of course, I don't think.
Absolutely.
I was absolutely thrilled to see the bear appearing in this next book. So I'm taking from, your book's themes that you're an animal lover. Is that right?
Yes, I absolutely am. And of course, Sophia does animals so brilliantly. So it's such a joy to have her as our illustrator.
Well, that leads me on to my next question. Were Sophia's illustrations how you'd imagine the characters in your mind?
That's a really good question. In fact, we had this conversation together last week because we met in London for the first time. And I did have a vague image of Quill and Legsy, but I think I always tend to try and keep my images. I tend to focus on the action and, if you like, put it scene by scene in my mind. And I tend to try and leave the characterization almost a bit vague because I know that the illustrator is going to do something far better than I could ever imagine. And so, but I didn't imagine Quill having his little red coat, and I absolutely adore it. I think that's wonderful.
It is amazing. It is amazing. Now, I happen to know that you've got another one of those gorgeous little toys, haven't you? Would you mind
Yes.
showing them to us? Look at that. Look at Legsy. They are so cute.
I'm just trying to find my cameras. I'm not very good at lining things up, but there we go.
Oh, they are right in the middle. That's perfect. Thank you so much for showing us those. They are gorgeous. So, obviously, the theme of the book very much is about having your voice heard. Was that something that was very important to you to get across, especially for younger children?
Yes, it absolutely was. And somebody asked me, was it sort of almost biographical about writing stories? And I didn't intend it to be, but the more I read it, the more I think, oh my goodness, yes, it is almost the story of every writer I've ever known that's struggled to get their stories out there. And I do think it's really important for children to learn that you try, you keep trying, you don't give up if you fail the first time.
Very much so. And I also like the positive representation of the cleaner with a hearing aid.
Yes.
Showing that, that's a real advantage for her because then she gets to hear Quill's story.
Yeah.
And was that something that just came to you, or was that a particular deliberate?
I think it did. It was actually more spontaneous because I'd written myself into a corner where I knew I needed Quill to do something above and beyond everything he'd done before, and so he had to be the one that shouted loudly enough for someone to hear him. And I was thinking, what? And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, it has to be a hearing aid user. And I do like to try to be as inclusive as possible in my book. So I was just really overjoyed that I could solve my plot point whilst also bringing in some, inclusion into the story. And I think I really want one of those bright pink hearing aids now.
Well, it looks very stylish.
Definitely going for that star when my time comes.
It definitely looks very stylish. So with the you said to yourself that you have younger grandchildren, and
Yes.
as I mentioned, I've got a young grandchild who I was actually with yesterday, and she absolutely loves the book. Have you been able to share your books with your grandchildren, and do they get lots of joy out of them?
Yes, and particularly this one because it's popping up in lots of shops and lots of my grandchildren in London are sort of going out and seeing it in shops around where they live, and that's a great thrill for them. And they're old enough now for me to sort of test drive them. Sometimes I tend to avoid test driving stories that are on my computer that aren't actually books because I think if you just hear a lot of words and there's no pictures, then they're going to switch off in any case. So I could do without that level of negativity, really. So I tend to just show them the books when they're actually books. Very occasionally, I'll share something that's a story in progress, but I would pick those really carefully, and it would just be for perhaps the older ones.
So with your own children, what picture books were their favourites?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I've got a few here actually. They had Oh, my children are grown-ups and they've got children of their own. So we're going back many years. So they like this one thing,
Oh,
which is lovely. Poinsettia and her family, which I think is an American story, but it's absolutely beautiful. There's no such thing as a dragon.
oh, I love
The thing
that
I've
one.
noticed, the troublesome pig,
Oh, I've not seen
um,
that one.
and How Who Fell in the Canal. And a lot of these stories are really much longer than the stories that children consume nowadays. They're quite long picture books. So there seems to be a trend now towards shorter stories, much shorter stories.
Yeah, I agree. It does seem to have become a lot more condensed, doesn't it? And I suppose it's just indicative of all of society's wanting everything in 5 seconds nowadays. That's sadly the way it goes, isn't it? So, are we allowed to ask what you're working on next?
You absolutely are. Yes, I've got a book coming out in July with Rocket Bird Books. It's called Grandad's Star. And it's a story about an astronomer, a famous astronomer, and it's told through the voice of his little granddaughter, but he's starting to lose his memory. So it's the impact that his decline into dementia has on his devoted little granddaughter. So it is a story with hope in it as well. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's centered around a world of stars and astronomy. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I've got another one coming out in January, but I'm not sure if I meant to say anything about it or not, but it is on Amazon. The cover has gone up on Amazon, but I haven't had the all clear yet to say anything, and that's with another publisher. Best not. I'll stay quiet. And there's a few more as well, but I'll just that's the little taster of what's going on for you.
Oh, yeah, that's intriguing. That is. That sounds absolutely fantastic. That does sound lovely. So, with the bear being put in Library Mouse, did you ask Sophia to put the bear in?
No, that wasn't me at all. That came, I think, from our amazing picture book designer, Becky Chilcott. And I was so thrilled when they suggested that. So, because he turns up in the library at the story time at the beginning of the book, and then my husband has just spotted, oh, there's the bear, and it's the end of the back of the book. It appears with someone taking it off the shelf as well. My husband hadn't spotted that until I think yesterday.
Oh, how lovely! And actually, speaking of the back of the book, that was the last thing I wanted to comment on because I love the writing tips in the back.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes,
and also the questions. You know, because I think those questions would be so great to work with children when you're working on empathy.
Absolutely. I do feel for me that this book is all about empathy, really, and emotions and different way. And I can't believe how many emotions Sophia's got into the artwork. It's amazing. She's just captured every nuance of Quill's multitude of emotions.
Yeah. It is, you can tell when he's fed up.
Yeah.
And when he's hopeful, and when he's just a delight, isn't he, Quill, in here? He's just so lovely, I think, I think lots of us would quite like to have a book writing mouse living on our bookshelves, to be fair. Although I don't think he'd last long with my 2 cats, but there we are.
Yeah, we've got 2 cats as well.
Well, there you are then. You know what I mean. Well, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you. And I'm really looking forward to that next one, Frances, as well. We'll be looking out for that when it comes out.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
But thank you very much for sharing the Library Mouse. And as I say, I'm off to buy myself another copy because otherwise I won't get to keep one. It'll go to my granddaughters.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to hear that. And I'm so pleased your granddaughter likes it. Say hello to her from Quill.
I will indeed. I will indeed. I will actually show her that you saying hello to her because that will make her even happier. Thanks very much, Frances.
Lovely to chat. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Creator for April 2024. And I'm thrilled to be sitting here just about to interview Keith Gray about his latest book for Barrington Stoke, which is called The List. So welcome, Keith. It's lovely to meet you.
It's really nice to be invited along. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And what a fabulous backdrop you've got there.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all real, honestly, and I've read most of them, not all, but most of them. Yeah.
Well, we'll let you off with most of them. That's definitely fine. Okay, now we usually like to start with a reading from the book. Is that okay with you, Keith?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So hopefully this is a self-explanatory chapter, so I won't go into too much background. Kind of does set up the book, I hope. So, just from the list, 4 days left, chapter 3. The next day, Denny was waiting for me at the duck pond in the park. He had 2 plastic buckets, one in each hand. Denny was excited, bubbly. I was tired, blurry-eyed. It was 6 in the morning. Even the ducks on the pond looked sleepy. I only had one bucket, mucky and brown. I'd found it at the back of Dad's shed behind the lawnmower, and I'd had to tip the spiders who'd been living inside out. My mum wanted to know why I needed a bucket. I told Denny. I'd had to ask her last night if I could borrow it. What did you tell her? He asked. I said that you wanted it because you had some kind of plan. And what did your mum say about that? Denny asked. Nothing. She just rolled her eyes. I'll miss you, Mum, Denny said. I nodded but stared down into my bucket at the tatty cobwebs still inside. Denny saying that about my mum gave me a sudden stab of sadness. My mum had already said she'd miss Denny too. Not as much as I would, but still. What are the buckets really for? I asked. I wanted to get on with it. Doing something was better than standing around thinking. Denny stepped up to the edge of the pond and bent down to scoop water into one of his buckets. We've got to fill them up, he said. Are you allowed to do that? I asked. Isn't it stealing? Stealing pond water, Denny scoffed. I shrugged, but still checked to see if we were being watched. Apart from a woman walking a dog by the footy pitch, we were alone in the park. I dunked my bucket into the pond and watched the murky water swirl inside. I caught a crisp packet and a clump of soggy duck feathers. I went to fish the crisp packet out, but Denny stopped me. His buckets were so full the water sloshed over onto the path when he put them down. One of them had an empty vape pen floating in it. I've made that list I told you about, Denny said. He took a piece of paper out of his back pocket, and as he unfolded it, I saw it was covered in scribbles and crossings out. There's loads and loads I really want to do before I leave, so I've had to choose the most important. The paper was almost all black scrawls, except for 5 sentences he'd underlined twice and circled in red. Denny read the 5 sentences aloud. 1. Get revenge on Mal. 2. Relive my first kiss. 3. Say sorry to Mrs. Hoobler. 4. Return what I stole. 5. Ride Burdock again. He read his list in a really serious tone of voice. He sounded like a boring vicar. I don't get it, I said. What's to get? Denny sounded offended. These are impossible, aren't they? I said. It was my turn to go all serious. I pointed at his red circled sentences one by one. Mal's just going to kick you in if you do anything to him. There's no way on this planet you'll ever be able to get Tabby to kiss you again. Mrs. Hoobler probably wouldn't be happy even if you said sorry 100 times. If you give back something you stole, then you'll have to admit you nicked it in the first place. And last time you tried to ride Burdock, he booked you off and you nearly broke your neck. Denny scowled, angry with me. So don't help me then. He folded up his list. I never said I won't help you, but... I shrugged. But what? Denny asked. I shrugged again. Look, I have to leave on Sunday, Denny said. You're probably the only one who cares. My mum and dad care. Yeah, okay, maybe them, but no one else. And I swear, I really need to do this stuff. Denny waved his sheet of paper at me. It's like I'm, sort of tying up loose ends or something. I felt like I began to understand. Like setting the record straight, I said. Exactly, Denny nodded. Leaving your mark, I asked. He nodded again and beamed his big grin. That too. I still reckon they're impossible, I said. Denny shoved his list back into his jeans pocket, swapping it for his phone. I've got plans, and I want to remember everything. He took a photo of me standing there holding my bucket. So why did you make me get out of bed so early? I asked. And what are we meant to do with 3 buckets of pond water? Top of the list, Denny said. Getting revenge on Mal.
Wonderful. Well, I normally ask authors to tell us a little bit about the plot and what the story is about, but that sets us up perfectly. That tells us everything we need to know. And I love the bit that comes after that because it's the pond water and its use is real slapstick type stuff, isn't it? It's like a classic mistake that goes on. And I really enjoyed reading that bit.
Thank you. Yeah.
So Denny's list of things that he wants to do, we just heard, they seem impossible, but they're also quite little things. But the importance to him is absolutely immense. So, what was your thinking behind those choices?
That's a really good question. I guess I immediately you jump to the big things, actually, strangely enough. When I was first coming up with the idea of the story and scribbling down a few ideas, I was jumping to huge life-changing events that may happen to a young person. And I kind of realized that one, writing a short book, I was never going to be able to, on a practical side of things, never fit it into a few pages and a few words. And I kind of also thought that one of the great things about being a young person is that small things do matter. Well, maybe that's a great thing, and maybe that's a not so great thing. But the small things do matter to us when we're younger. As a young person, I think we've never been as bored as we've ever been in our whole lives, ever, and we've never been as excited as we've been in our whole lives, ever. Everything's sort of turned up to 11, and these items that Denny chooses for him, they matter, and they make Denny feel the person he is, rather than world peace or curing cancer or something like that. These are the things that matter to Denny as a 13-year-old.
Well, I've got to say, all of your books, you get the portrayal of young men absolutely spot on. And it's something you're known for. And especially I enjoyed, the portrayal of the friendships in the book, because the way in which you write about the friendships, the deep feeling that they do have is shown in such subtle ways is just fantastic. How do you feel you get inside the mind of young men so well, apart from having been a young man yourself, of course? But are these friendships, have they grown up as you've grown up? Are your male friendships the same sort of format as they were when you were a young person?
No, not exactly. And I'd say not exactly, unfortunately. And maybe that's why I enjoy writing about young friendships for young people, or male friendships for young people, because there is part of me that kind of wishes I could still have those carefree times with my mates now, even though we're in our 50s now. That would be lovely. So maybe there's a little bit of wish fulfillment going on personally in my stories there. But I felt I was very, very lucky. Even when I was at school in my teenage years, I knew I was lucky with the friends I had.
Yeah.
There was a couple of people who'd stand next to me, no matter how stupid I was, or arrogant I was, or how many mistakes I made. And a couple of them are still around now. We do still keep in touch. We live in different countries, maybe, and we've got families of our own. But I really like, I do. So, yes, I'm writing a little bit about the people I knew when I was younger, changing the names to protect the innocent and all that kind of thing. Um, and I suppose I quite like the idea of writing about young men who aren't superheroes. There's a lot of books out there for younger male readers, teenage boy readers, but they're about being a spy, or about being a superhero, or they're about saving the world. And I kind of want to write about that little bit of heroism that's inside all of us, that we might not know we've got inside us at the time, or might not feel about it, but that heroism of standing up for your friends, of that loyalty, that bonding that can happen in your teenage years. And I've always been interested in writing about that loyalty, and that bonding, and that friendship. That's kind of, it crops up in more than a few of my books, I've got to admit. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly does. It certainly does. I what I really enjoy as well is the way that you inject touching moments in that you don't actually realize at that second are so touching. And to give you an example with this book, it's really hard to do this, isn't it, without giving plot
Yeah,
points?
that's the problem.
It's really difficult. But
I'll forgive you.
the things that are found on the phone, that really got to me. It really did. The fact that Denny has basically been photographically documenting his friendship. And I found it was just so touching. I absolutely loved that bit, Keith. So
Thank you. Yeah.
it's something that, and it's so difficult getting that over, as you've already mentioned. You're writing for Barrington Stoke. This is, I think, your third book for Barrington Stoke, is it?
It's my third in. I'm seeing this as a kind of a bit of a sequence, like
Yeah.
a bit of a loose trilogy. These two, there's been one or two before, but these three do have the same themes and the same ideas behind them, if the characters change. But yeah, this is the third one in that kind of sequence I've done for Barrington Stoke.
So how difficult is that for you to get all of that story, all of the plot twists and everything in what is a curtailed amount of text that you're allowed to use, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. I always approach writing for Barrington Stoke. I approach it that yes, they're seen as books for struggling readers and for reluctant readers, and for young people who may not enjoy reading. But just because they may have issues with reading, and may not be seen as the best readers at school or the best readers in the class, I don't think that takes away from anybody's emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
I still feel that these young people have great, big, fat, stonking, huge emotions that we all have, you know? And then they also have those little tiny niggling emotions as well. So I kind of go in for for as much emotion as I can, but with a kind of a plot that will carry the reader on. And I'd like to think it's so nice what you said about the moment you mentioned with the phone, because I aim for those kind of emotional moments. A lot of my ideas for books come from, well, how would somebody feel if? I know a lot of writers say, oh, what if this happens? I often come up with an idea for a book as in, how would somebody feel if? So for me, I kind of rush through certain moments in the book to get to those moments like the phone. That's the bit I'm going to be excited about writing, more than a car chase, perhaps. I want to find out how somebody feels. And so with the Barrington Stoke, I don't want to shy away from those. Okay, maybe the language might be a little bit more accessible and the sentence construction a little bit more accessible, but I still want the full emotional impact if possible.
Yeah.
And the actual physical writing of the book, I mean, I think the list is about 17 or 18,000 words, something like that. But I would have the very first draft would have been closer to about 26,000 words. I kind of get it all out and then I cut back and cut back and cut back. And that's the way I always approach a Barrington Stoke book, is get it all on the page and then get a big red pen out. I write it with a pencil in a notepad a lot of the time, actually, and get a big red pen out and literally cut out sentences that I don't think are working or are useful for the story or the characters. And that's hard because you're cutting out some of your favourite jokes and things like that. But yeah, if I start big like that, a Barrington Stoke book, and I cut it down, keeping everything that I want to keep if possible.
Well, I've got to say you're a master at it, because it certainly doesn't read as a book that is tailored for a reluctant reader or whatever. And to be fair, a lot of teenage boys, whether they struggle with reading, whether they're reluctant readers, they like shorter books anyway.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the way of it. With when I was a school librarian, I was in an all boys secondary school, so you know I'm very used to it. And if I tried to offer them a book that was, you know, that thick, you got no chance. You got no chance, because boys just will not sit there and focus on it that much if it's that long a book. So you know, I mean, I absolutely love the length of it, and I thought it was fantastic. And what I do really enjoy with your books is that we do see the emotional side of these young teenage boys, because you know they're all full of bravado and seeming as though they don't care about anything, but we all know that on the inside, you know, these kids are as worried about things and feel things, as you quite rightly say, just as much as anybody else, you know. And it's lovely to see that in a book. If we are allowed to, Keith, can I ask what you're working on next?
Yeah, I'm working on a book I've been working on for quite a while, actually. It's a bit of a struggle, and it's a bigger book. It's not with Barrington Stoke. It's going to be a bigger book, but I'm selling it. I'm talking about it. Do you remember the film Die Hard with Bruce Willis back in the?
Yeah.
It was the first ever 18 certificate movie I saw. I can remember going to cinema to see Die Hard with my mates. Well, imagine Die Hard but with werewolves, and I'll leave it at that.
What a way to end an interview. My goodness. We will definitely be looking out for that one. So I've got to ask the question then, as you've mentioned Die Hard. Is Die Hard a Christmas film, Keith?
We watch it every Christmas. We do. We watch it every Christmas. We'd say yes, we would. Yeah.
Right answer. My husband and I completely agree. We watch all of them every Christmas, so that's great. Thanks ever so much, Keith. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
As I say, loved the book, absolutely loved it, and can't wait for the Die Hard one. That sounds even better.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed with that one. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Keith.
Thank you.